Hey y'all, you're listening to
Two Wives and a Spark.
As an interracial couple, we've learned a lot over the years, and we're committed to sparking conversations that build community and explore how race influences everything. Literally everything. So that's our focus for this podcast.
Because we believe that intentional conversations are vehicles for change. We've seen the power of them in our relationship over the years, and we know that when we really listen to each other and to ourselves, we see the truth in new and revealing ways.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
You're listening to Two Wives and a Spark. Hey y'all, this week we're going to be talking to you about the intention gap. What happens when our intentions don't match our impact? Whew. I feel like this is my daily conversation with children as we are constantly talking about who was first in line and they took the ball from me, right? Like really teaching. Well, the key thing there though is just teaching how something makes another person feel. Your intention may not have been to make that person sad, may not have been to make that person feel like you wanted to hurt them, but the intent was still a very real thing. So this week we'll be talking more about that. Before we do, as always, we want to open it up with a quote to get us to dive into this work and to just bring the ancestors into the room. This quote is by Angelou, and she says, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." Whew. Dr. Angelou always had the words, always had the power behind some of the most simplest statements, but truly, when you know better, do better. And we cannot wait to just share and dialogue with you today, specifically around that and how our intentions truly do need to match the impact that we have, but how oftentimes there is a lack of awareness of what our intentions are doing to cause a bigger impact. So Before we jump into that, Miss Rachel, when better, do better. How have you used that quote in your life and in experiences that you've had?
I thought you were telling me so. I thought you were about to give me some feedback on air.
Not on the air. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, that was funny. How has that stood out to me? Yeah, and I feel like I heard it for the first time from you, I think. And I think it was about, I honestly can't remember when it was, but I just can hear your words. Like, when you know better, you do better. I think I messed up. I said something. I did something. I'm an overthinker and I'm a recovering perfectionist and recovering people pleaser. So when I hear that I impacted someone in a way that I did not intend to, it really gets me. I can spiral into this place of, oh my gosh, overthinking. So I think you're way better at setting boundaries, and you've taught me a lot about that. And so I just remember you being like, okay, you heard that thing and now better, so do better.
Yeah, because I think it's by design in human nature, you, especially if your intent was not to harm, if your intent was not to, again, make someone feel sad or mad or angry or upset, that I think people I found this in children often, can spiral into their own defense. But I didn't mean to do that. Or I didn't. And so you begin, I think as adults, you begin to add on to the different layers of that. I didn't mean to do that. I don't see color. Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're just being too sensitive because that wasn't what I meant to do. And instead we could just say, oh my goodness, that was not my intention. Thank you for letting me acknowledge and for letting me see the impact that I've had. And now I can do better in the future. But instead we spend way more time on the, let me clarify for you how I didn't mean to make you feel. Right. Which is like, you don't have rights over my body, mentally or physically. You don't have rights over how something makes me feel. And so I think the sooner we can really address that point and get that clear in people's minds, which is why I'm starting it with children, because I just have so much hope for the generations to come, then the sooner we can spend more time in the actual, now let's do better.
Yeah. Right? And this conversation is so key because it plays out in different ways, and who we are really matters in this conversation. Like, our identity impacts the intention gap. So I can say, as a white person, hearing you share all the things that you just did, I was like, right, that's a lot of what you just described is white fragility. And there's a responsibility that I think white folks have in this conversation that's distinct. And how we listen to this conversation, I want to invite us to really hold up the mirror and reflect on our own identities, because I know for me, it is there's such a journey. And I think we've talked a lot about how some folks are very familiar with this intent versus impact, and other people are just now understanding this phenomena of white fragility, or that wasn't my intention. And so there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in this. And so I think I'd be curious to hear your perspective on what you say, where you're grounded in this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, as you just said, for white folks, I was thinking for Black folks, I want to have some permissions too. I think, and I know that there's probably more folks listening that are not white or Black, but I think we'll speak from the communities that we represent for right now. And I think I have learned, and something I want to give permission to if folks feel like they need that, is it is really, really important to acknowledge, when we say acknowledge impact, most of the time that is wrapped into how something made you feel. And we have learned, I think as Black people, I have learned specifically as a Black woman, to move on, to move past how something made me feel. But while you physically are moving past it, you're mentally and emotionally holding it for a very long time. And so that's what the bag lady is, right? That's what this concept of like carrying the weight that's not yours to carry comes from. I really want to advise that we start sharing how things make us feel, right? So while your intention may not have been to make me feel sad about that, I do feel sad about it. And I feel sad about it because it hurts when you don't see me as an equal or as a human or whatever the case may be. And I think this is why the culture around, quote unquote, the Karens has taken off, because there's sadness behind it. There is sadness behind the fact that I can't just go out as a Black woman or as a Black man or whomever and live my free life without being under attack. And then what comes out of that is anger. But what's really rooted in it, that real impact, is sadness, that I can't just be my free self. And so I do want there to be some freedoms to think about how things have made you feel and the impact. Yeah. This is something I'm really, really pushing for my students right now, is just really being clear about how things make them feel, where it shows up in their bodies, because the sooner we can learn that skill, oh man, I think about those kids like when they're 20, 30 years old, and I'm like, you're on some good fill-ins vocabulary.
Well, right. You think about, so a lot of what so there's so many things that I just heard that I'm like, I want to come back to that. And I'm curious to talk more about that. But the first thing that's on my mind is how big this conversation is, and how we're going to get the tip of the iceberg here. Like when we talk about intent versus impact and moving toward racial harmony, I think this is really at the crux of what we need to work on as humans, working on being more aware of our intentions, because I think people are in such reactive, fast-paced modes. Not everybody even gives themselves the permission to set an intention. What am I really? We're just reacting. I saw that, so I'm going to call that out. Or I'm like, can I pause and think, what truly is my intention? Other than, I didn't mean to make you feel upset. Like, truly, why did I just say what I just said? So first is like the awareness piece. Second is, how am I acting to be intentional, to make sure that my intentions match my impact? And then third, how am I holding myself accountable? I talk a lot about this in the ebook that I wrote earlier, but it's like this framework of awareness, action, accountability. I dig in a lot on a daily basis, because it's like, to your point earlier, it doesn't matter if our intentions were good. If someone tells us that we hurt their feelings or that we impacted them negatively, I think it's our responsibility to own that and to say, I take responsibility for impacting you. I had an unintended impact, and it doesn't matter what my intentions were. If it impacted you that way, I need to have some ego distance and separate myself from my ego and truly try to empathize with what I could have said or done that caused that harm.
Yeah, when you were going through the first year awareness, second year actions, and third year accountability, I was thinking for the actions, that's kind of, I think, where the meat is at. Because I think sometimes we get into these stumbling places where it's like, my actions are the same towards everyone. And so then we get into this I don't see color conversation, right? Because I treat everyone the way that I would want to be treated. And as I think deep in your heart, as much as you do want to believe that, if this is speaking to you, truly, that's just not true. Just by design, we are meaning-making people. And so we are constantly making meaning of things based on what we see and based on what we don't see. Yeah. And so our actions, when we say actions, right, it's like did I say or do something differently to that white woman versus to this Black woman? Like, one of the things that when I think about the intention versus impact gap that impacts me a lot, actually, is I've been in multiple stores, Target, Marshall's, REI, the grocery store, you name it. I personally think that I dress very well for as an educator. Bow ties, slacks, saying I kind of step out, and I will go to these stores oftentimes after work. You got to find that time when you can when you're an educator. And I have been asked numerous times, headphones in, numerous times, if I work in these locations. The impact is the way it hurts my feelings, I think, and why it hurts my feelings. It's not that I take a job at REI for sure. I'd like that discount, or HEB, shout out to the HEB. But I think the impact of why it hurts my feelings is because you don't see me any other way as a Black woman in these spaces. And I think sometimes actually because I dress more professionally than that equates to, oh, okay, you must have a job here. And I think not feeling seen outside of retail is something that does hurt my heart. And this is across race. This has happened not just with white people, but also with people of color. And I think that has been the part too that has saddened and made an impact. And can I think about how their intentions probably weren't to harm? I can, right? I can create space for that. Instead, I choose to make space for the impact it's had on me so that I don't carry it around and every time I go to the store. Yeah. But it has happened enough times for me to carry it around every time I go to the store. So that's my just personal experience in real life, the intention gap, and how it's a hard gap to be in, to see, to feel, to have a moment with. Yeah.
To be on the receiving end. I remember when you came home and shared one day, I think you've only told me about it happening a few times, but I remember feeling such frustration and anger and sadness when you shared it with me, and this feeling of, how are people so thoughtless? Why can't we just take 10 extra seconds to look? Does this person have a name tag on? Are they wearing the shirt that everybody else is wearing? Why? Because it does harm. And these are microaggressions. All the work of Daryl Sue and all the research behind microaggressions, I will put in the show notes, because these are micro insults, microaggressions, micro assaults. They have lasting and damaging effects. And until people, to Dr. Maya Angelou's quote, when you know better, do better. And if we don't all know what a microaggression is, this is an opportunity to learn. And once we've learned it, we can't unsee and unhear it. So on one hand, as your wife, I feel just the frustration and sadness as someone who loves you deeply and doesn't want you to feel sad and feel, it's just like frustrating because you're just trying to live your life and just get your groceries. And it's like that little, what Ijeoma Oluo, the author of the book So You Want to Talk About Race, describes microaggressions as like being punched in the arm regularly. Like you're just walking, minding your business, and someone punches you in the arm and it's like, ow, that hurt. I was just trying to do my thing. And you get punched and punched and punched, and you start to have your guard up. And so just want to acknowledge and honor that experience that you described, and also at the same exact time know that as a white woman, I cannot empathize with that experience. There's nothing I can do other than learn and do better and share and educate, and also own my own. I'm way more likely to be on you're on the receiving end of a lot more microaggressions. As a white person, I'm more likely to be on the giving end of a microaggression, and that's my work to do. Like when I read the article that we'll put in the show notes, like the first time I read it, I remember some of the examples that they offer as common microaggressions. Like I literally remember being taught some of those in school. We're colorblind. We don't see color. I remember hearing teachers ask kids, like, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? And I am certain, 100% certain, that I have said many of those things mindlessly in high school, college, until I knew better. Even as a new teacher, the example that I shared last week when my kids called me out for being white and not understanding. I'm pretty positive that my rebuttal, my comeback was, but I don't see color. I'm colorblind. We're all one family. That was my go-to. I truly, and this is the thing that we have to be accountable to. If I just stay attached to the fact that my intentions were pure, that it writes me off from having to do the work and hold myself accountable. Just because my intentions were pure doesn't mean I caused harm. And so now to restore the harm and repair trust that gets broken when we say things like that, that's the work that I'm trying to be on in this part of my journey, is like really being rigorous with myself about explicitly communicating my intentions and trying to understand, did my intent match my impact? It never stops. I have to always do the work.
Yeah, it's funny, as you're talking, I'm thinking through, like, you don't often always know about your impact, especially when we're in just community shared spaces and there's no attachment around, I know you or whatever.
Right.
And so even as I was sharing the experiences that I've had in multiple stores, I have never to any of those people said, actually, when you just asked me that, like, it hurt my feelings because I'm not sure why you thought I worked here. Right. And I think a part of it is because sometimes in my head, I'm like, well, what's that going to do? But I do think if I'm intentional, back to this point around taking some extra seconds to be clear about what your intent is, if I'm intentional about what maybe I should just share with this person, there are some key things you can look for before asking someone that question. One, if there's a uniform, like in Target, there's a uniform. Look to see who has on that uniform.
Right.
If there's a name tag, just so that you're not randomly asking people if they work there.
Yeah.
Now, I think I'm going to make a commitment, right? Because I am clear that this will happen again to me. And as sad as that is to be clear about, that is just the truth. So I think the thing I can do next time so that it doesn't continue to happen to other people that look like me or happen eventually to our future children when they are old enough is to take a deep breath, because I have my own internal tools that I trust and am used to using to then share with that person. Now, it won't always, I think, be a happy ending and wrap it up with a bow, but I do think sometimes when intent impacts you in a way that is super hurtful and there's no resolve, there's no go back to, then we do end up carrying it longer than we need to. I think it's people of color specifically, and I think it's Black people specifically, to be even more clear. So I just want to recognize that I have never actually gone back to share with someone in those moments when they're strangers to say, hey, when you asked me that, it had an impact on me. Yeah. And I just wanted to, I can show up however I want, but I think when we talk about holding space to create a better world, I would do it if I felt like I could do it with grace and with a clear head.
I'm having a reaction to that because I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, you are such a good person. And you're just so kind and thoughtful to think about doing that.
I didn't say I was going to 100% do it. I said.
Well, so on one hand, I'm like, wow, that is the work, right? When I'm wanting to be at my best, that's the version of me that I want to be too, is being better at giving and receiving feedback at any given moment. And on the other hand, I felt like I'd sighed this deep sigh just a second ago because I was like, why does it have to be on the burden of the person who's on the receiving end? That is frustrating. You were trying to live your life. You're trying to get your groceries. And now it's your burden to suspend whatever was going on in your moment in that second. And you might have had a long day. And now it's your job to educate. And this is a conversation that we hear about and talk about a lot. Like, more white folks need to be doing the work with each other because it shouldn't be on the burden of people who are historically more likely to experience racism in micro and macro ways to have to educate. And so I feel frustrated about that. I don't know what to do with it, but I just know that I wonder if it's a combination of a lot of things that's going to help bridge this intention gap on the collective level. I don't think it should be on you.
Yeah, you know what I think, though? The reason why it even came into my spirit, I think, is because there's an energy shift that happens with that, right? So when those interactions have happened to me and the store, while I continue to do my shopping, if it's a grocery store, then I make my way over to the wine aisle, but after that interaction. But when I continue to do my shopping, I am now carrying the weight of the energy you just gave me that I didn't ask for. So let me kindly go on ahead and get that energy back.
That's fair.
So you could make your way over to the wine aisle with your energy. Right. And I make my way over with my energy. Right? Because I think that's what ends up happening. Yeah. So then I'm over here carrying energy that was never mine to carry in the first place that I don't even want. And you over here probably moving on, didn't even realize you made an impact. That's not fair.
Right.
Really, if we really want to talk about just carrying the weight of things. And so I think that's where I'm coming from with it. Now, if I've had, to your point, when I've had those long work days and I've already been talking to people about their intent versus impact, and then that's probably not going to be the day I choose to do this. Mm-hmm. But I think that there will be a day when I am like, no, not my energy to carry. Mm-hmm. And you probably didn't mean to give it to me, but you did. Right. And so let's both have a learning moment. Yeah. Because my learning moment is to give it back. Yeah. Yeah. And your learning moment is to hold it.
That's real. And that's actually a really good point, because we were talking about the marathon last week, and maybe that's one of the muscles that we just have to build and get better at, is like divorcing. Like the more practice we have, the more we divorce ourselves from this big daunting, I don't know, because the way you just described that really stuck with me. And I think that's right. It's not your burden to carry in that moment. So what is the best next step? Yeah. I wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. That's again, Rachel got her notes. I was not thinking of going that route, but that's what came into my spirit. So
I'm glad you shared that story, because I think when we talk about the intention gap at S.P.A.R.K and in different places, like professionally, it's about really, when it comes to equity, inclusion, anti-racism work, we have to get more practiced at slowing down for just a second to think about, what is my intention and how am I going to communicate this for this conversation? Hey, I would love for us to start this book club, and I want us to read How to Be Anti-Racist, and here's why, and here's what I hope the impact of this book club can be. Or that's one example. We hear about people starting racial affinity groups all the time. We hear about people starting conversations about anti-racism at work in different spaces. And I think we can do harm if we're not really clear about how we're going to bridge our intentions. And so I just think there's so much to dig into here. But at the end of the day, something that's true that I just feel so grateful about in our relationship is, like, if you take away the layer of that, of course, the focus of this podcast is having conversations about race and racial harmony. But at the end of the day, bridging our intentions and our impact is just being a good communicator, right? In a lot of ways.
And a good community member.
Having self-awareness, emotional intelligence, like being relational, being a good person. And I feel really thankful for this. Is like a different level, but I think this shows up for us as a couple. And I'm thankful we had couples therapy that helped us communicate better together. I think, to the marathon metaphor from last time, it's like, it takes practice being in sync with someone else or with others on a team, and getting better at communicating what our intentions are, and getting really good at hearing, like, oh, that hurt your feelings. That was really not my intention. So how can I do better next time? Mm-hmm. We've had conversations like that as a couple all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think we once didn't know how to do that. Mm-hmm.
And just for the couples, if you're a couple listening out there and you're like, how y'all have those conversations? We go on walks. I think it is necessary to move your body when you're doing something that you know is going to be maybe a little scary, or that you're not surely aware of how it's going to end up. And anyway, we go on walks.
We had a lot. And even at ECP, we had walk and talks. That's been a theme of my feedback conversations, like moving, and just, there's something that happens in our bodies and minds when we're actually walking, that I think we have more blood flow or more oxygen, or maybe the pressure is a little bit less on, because we're not having to stare at each other's eyes the whole time, or something.
I'm showing you signs of focus.
That is a good point. I forgot that a lot of times we're walking. Mm-hmm. Huh.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't forgotten. I'm just kidding. The other thing I wanted to just mention about the intent, and I've only talked about right now just being on the side of the impact, but I've also been on the side of the intention, not knowing that I had hurt someone. Mm-hmm. And because, again, I try to live my life in all spaces and places in similar ways, where I'm trying to show up as a kind human and being respectful to others and showing love and kindness wherever I go. And so this is actually with a staff member. It was a year later when they felt like they could share with me a comment that I made that had a negative impact on them. And even though it was a year later, I was like, I could still own that wasn't my intention, and then learn from it, because it truly was a blind spot across a racial difference. And I think that it's okay to, especially if you're in community with someone, go back and name something. Because again, it's an energy release, I think, to be able to do that, because you are still carrying those things regardless. And doing it in a way that's not, let me show you how you're not all that you think you are. But it was more so in a way of, you may not even notice that this was something that impacted me. And that staff member was correct. I didn't notice it was something that impacted her. I had thought about it. We were doing some equity work, and I had thought about it. You try to think about the questions you're going to ask and the practices that you're going to do. And I thought about, as someone, she identified as Asian American, and she was our only Asian American staff member. And I had thought about that, but to the degree that I could, which goes back to this quote around, when you do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better.
Right.
So in that moment, I truly was doing the best I could until then. And now the next time I have a situation like that, it won't be the same, because I now know better. Doesn't mean I now have all of a sudden these magical tools that appeared out of nowhere. It just means that I now know I'm going to have to do better research before I, hold that space in that way again.
Yeah. I think it's such a good point to remember, because I remember as a school leader, I felt like feedback had to be instantaneous. Like, I gotta catch it while I can and give feedback or otherwise people aren't going to remember. In this space, what you just described takes a lot of bravery. It takes courage to speak up and say, you may not remember this, or you may not know that this even happened. And this was a year ago. This was 2 months ago. This was 3 weeks ago. Whenever it was, I think we just have to get back to the practice makes permanence, more practiced at speaking up when we're on the receiving end of the intention gap, and understanding that when we offer that feedback, because we're really feeding back to somebody something that perhaps they didn't know. I think about it a lot as when we're really good at giving feedback and good at receiving feedback, we have that muscle. It's not something that you like accidentally have. It just takes practice. And so I think for people who don't have as much practice, like, it doesn't ever get easy. It just gets less hard. I think it's one of those things that most people don't like jump into uncomfortable conversations. And, hey, let me just feel uncomfortable. Let me tell this person something that's probably going to make them feel really bad because they didn't know they did this. It's like having spinach in my teeth. You know how I hate when I have spinach in my teeth, and if we're at a dinner or whatever and it's been in my teeth and nobody's told me, and then we get home 2 hours later and I know the salad was 2 hours before and I just went through the whole dinner with spinach in my teeth. I'm like, Leah, why did you tell me? And it's that kind of feeling where now she knows that that's important to me. So she like will pull me to the side with love and like nudge under the table.
I'll be all up in her teeth when we eat salad now, just all up in there, like on the side and everything.
She knows that's important to me. And I think to me on the receiving end, I see that as an act of love, because she knows that at the end of the day, that is important. And so she says it with care and thoughtfulness, because it's just, there's a partnership that we have around like some kind of mutual understanding, if that makes sense.
And I think you don't have to be in love with every single person you're experiencing an intention gap with.
Right.
But I do think at the very least, you need to be in love with yourself, because I would hope that as you are growing and developing, you also want to be a better version of you.
Yes.
In the world.
Yes.
And yeah, because I think sometimes with our experiences, especially because we care so much about each other, some of this work has allowed itself to happen for us because we trust the other person's opinion so much, and we trust how our experiences are impacting each other.
Yeah.
Not everyone who's listening or everyone who's going to listen is going to have that same type of degree of care or love for another person, but you, I hope, have it for yourself.
Yeah.
So if for no other reasons, just making yourself a better human being does change the world. And so if folks can take that time too to just think about how they want to continue to improve for themselves, I think is important. How they want to think about the impact they are having as just their being on others, I think is important.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
Y'all, we showed up authentically in this one. I'll tell you that.
And there's so much more to dig into, and we'll continue to connect back to this. But I think it really is, to your point, like we have to be grounded and committed to just doing better as individuals. It can't be about doing this so other people see us as better, or doing this so that whatever. It just really, at the end of the day, has to be about us, our deep commitment to listening and to hearing and empathizing, and knowing that when we hear someone's truth, when somebody gives us the gift of feedback or information, we can't unhear it or unsee or unknow the impact that we've had. And so back to Dr. Maya Angelou is, so what do we do? When we know better, we do better. So what is ours to do? How do we continue to be intentional and to hold ourselves accountable and to act with thoughtfulness and deliberate choices as best we can, and knowing that we're going to fumble, we're going to mess up, we're going to say something. Nobody's perfect. There is no way you get through being committed to racial harmony, racial equity, racial justice. Like there's no path that doesn't have pitfalls and traps and roadblocks. Right. And we're all going to learn about this. So there's just no way. We just have to get better at doing it.
Yeah, there's no easy walk in the park where it's just flowers and rainbows and birds chirping. There are moments of that where it just seems so aligned and so beautiful, but that's not the whole journey. So I think as you're on your journey this week, really thinking about your intentions and the impact you're having not only on others, but also on yourself.
Yeah.
How you can be the light for yourself and the love for yourself so that you can really do better.
Yeah.
And think about the ways in which you can do better this week. That's something I'll be thinking about.
Yeah. And we referenced quite a bit of resources in this one, so we'll put those in the show notes. The link to the article on microaggressions, the link to the resources on white fragility, the link to the ebook if folks want to talk more. It's called Inclusion Starts with I. And
Capital I?
Yeah. We have to get into like all the layers of this work, the awareness, the action, and the accountability. So we can't wait to hear what this sparks for you. And we really would love to hear what you think of when you think of the intention gap, and what stories you connected to, and what ways in which are you working to be more intentional and more accountable to your impact. We'd love to hear what's working for you and where you're getting stuck or what challenges you're facing, because we'd love to keep those connections and conversations going.
Yeah, I'm sure this is one we'll come back to because there's so much more we could dive into. But for the sake of your ears and your time, we'll stop it right here.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much. Sending you lots of love and light. Till next time.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Two Wives and a Spark.
Let's stay connected on Instagram and Facebook at Two Wives and a Spark, all spelled out.
If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend so we can keep the sparks of connection going. Also, if you want to access our episodes as soon as they drop, click that subscribe button. Also, y'all, every rating and review counts. You know, it helps people find us. Also, it lets us know how y'all really feel about us deep down inside. So go on ahead and rate and review us.
Special shout out to Journey Girl Magic Productions.